people who are more product focused, who will ask questions, who kind of care less about how it gets done, but more that it gets done and it achieves a business goal.
Yeah.
Those are the types of engineering teams that will be more successful in the future and be more successful right now.
Welcome back to the Badass Leaders Podcast. Today we have a truly inspiring guest, Tracy Lee. Tracy is the CEO and co-founder of This.Labs, a leading software consultancy that helps businesses solve complex challenges through technology. With a strong background in both business and engineering, Tracy is not only an entrepreneur, but also a Google developer expert, Microsoft MVP, and GitHub star. With years of experience leading and scaling engineering teams, she brings valuable insights into leadership, hiring, and the evolving role of product-focused engineering. Okay, if you're new to the podcast, welcome to our community. We are super excited to have you here. And we are really grateful that you took time out of your day to learn and grow with us. So before you forget, take a moment and click that subscribe button to ensure you stay connected with the Badass Leaders community. And if you leave a comment, you'll get a personal response from me. I would be very grateful. Are you ready? Let's do this. So join me, Angela Gill Nelms, on today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast, where I'm joined each week by industry experts for intimate and eye-opening discussions about the challenges and joys facing the leaders of today. Listen in and get ready to scale your company, grow your brand, and unlock your full badass potential. Listeners, I am, as I said in the intro, very excited to have Tracy here. Not only is she an amazing human being, an amazing badass leader, as you're going to find out, but she's also a dear friend of mine. So it's extra awesome. But why don't we take a moment and why don't you introduce yourself and tell us why you're here today?
Yes. Well, I'm here because you invited me. My name's Tracy. I always say you can follow me on Twitter at Lady Lead or on LinkedIn at Tracy S. Lee. It's interesting because I've been doing startup for all my life. And what I really realized in my last startup was one thing that I really enjoy doing is bringing people together all the time, right? So I kind of do that. I mean, This Dot is my second successful company, if you will. I've been doing it for about 8 years now, and we are a software consultancy. So coming from the Silicon Valley, very lucky to have amazing clients. I mean, tons of amazing logos. Some of my favorite partnerships these days are Wikimedia, DocuSign, Stripe. If you're kind of like in the tech geeky world, Sentry, Twilio, Cloudinary, those types of folks. And then a lot of really amazing other brands like MailChimp. So we love just doing application development. I think developers like to solve problems and help people. And the fact that you can do that through technology, I think is really amazing. So
I love, this is not one of my prepared questions, but solve problems and help people.
Yes.
That is huge. Can you tell me a little bit more about, because as you mentioned, you've been an entrepreneur your entire career,
Yes.
which is amazing. You've probably had a lot of ups and downs throughout that journey. So we should talk about a couple of those. But how did you land on, because I've worked in software several times and never really thought about it until you just said that about developers and people liking to solve problems and help people. So how did you really land on that?
How did I land on wanting to use software to help people?
Yeah, there you go. Let's do it.
All right. Well, once upon a time, I had a boyfriend and he was wearing this shirt and it was like this little squirrel looking thing. And I was like, what's that? And he said, that's the, I forgot what it is, like the Ember.js has this little mascot, right?
Right.
And that's how I got introduced to Java. I was like, what's JS? He said, JavaScript. I said, like Java? Like the typical thing that like everybody does.
Right.
I had been coming from being a non-technical co-founder at a startup. So that company was getting acquired. As that company was getting acquired, I met him. And then I still remember, because actually, we weren't getting acquired at that very time. I think probably like 6 months into the relationship, then the company was acquired. But at that time, we were trying to figure out how to scale the business and do a little bit of a pivot. And as we were going through that pivot, I would come home with these problems. I would say, oh my gosh, this is such a hard thing that we're dealing with. And for about a week, he would, after work, come home, I would tell him a problem, and he said, just give me 5 minutes. And he would write a script to solve my problem.
And like, what year was this? Because this is pre-AI, so it's not like he was going and
No, he
doing
like
a Google
literally
search.
wrote a script. Yeah,
Exactly.
This was probably, I think it was 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, by the end of that week, he had, kind of eliminated one person's job, right? And at the time I was paying that person, I think $40,000 or $50,000. And I said, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So, fast forward, that company got acquired. And then through that time I said, well, maybe I should learn how to code. So, it's not very often when you're kind of grinding and hustling in startup that you can stop and learn a new skill set. Right. But at that time, for those who are familiar with the web, 2015 is kind of when the web exploded, when all these opportunities started happening, all these new technologies. I mean, just really a lot of innovation, right? And so I was very fortunate to learn how to code at that time. And I don't know, I just, I kind of hung out for a while. 3 weeks into my coding journey, some guy on the internet asked me, if I would give a talk at a conference. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, I'm 3 weeks into this coding journey. Yeah. And I said, sure, I guess so. And so I did. And, it was well received. I mean, I was just talking about my journey and learning how to code. And then I said, okay, well, let's just keep doing this. So, gosh, I mean, 2015 on for a few years, I was speaking at like 4 to 8 conferences a month. I mean, I was just traveling around the world. Yeah, I was just having fun, right? Like I didn't really have a job necessarily. And then about a year, and I said, you know what, I should probably do something. And then I said, well, let's start a consultancy. So started a consultancy. And honestly, it was just because I was surrounded by so many amazing people. Like all my friends were core team members of different frameworks and technologies. I love bringing people together. So I just said, okay, let's all start something together. And that's kind of how This Dot was born.
Yeah. And we should mention that sometimes people love doing things, but they're not great at it. Mm-hmm. And you are great at bringing people together.
Thank you.
Were born as a connector and you will always be a connector. And it's huge, especially in the Atlanta ecosystem. We think about a lot of the work you're doing right now in the life sciences space and helping women, bring women together. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? So you run This Dot, which is software consultancy,
right?
But you also have like 10 other projects that you're working on. What are some of the other passions that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything kind of boils down to, I think, This Dot is a consultancy, right? Like I've never really sold, we don't have salespeople, right? I guess I am a salesperson, if you will. But I don't really, I don't go out and, sell.
Beat the streets, or you're not cold calling constantly.
Right, exactly. And I really believe in the power of building community because, like, that's how I built my first company. That's how I built my second company. I still remember, going back to this boyfriend. He kept like, we were dating. He was talking about. He's like, oh, these people, like, oh, did you know that this guy, he's like does all this stuff on the internet? And I'm thinking, are you just talking about they're on Twitter? Like, why don't, I'm on Twitter. Like, let me just talk to these people. And that's kind of how it started. And because I was just building community in the JavaScript ecosystem at the time, that's kind of what inspired me to, start this company, right? Fast forward, I feel like, as entrepreneurs, you kind of have to reevaluate your life every 5 to 10 years or so.
Yep.
And so, This Dot now going on 8 years, right? Or going on 9 years this year. A few years ago, I kind of stopped and started to think like, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to keep doing This Dot? And, the answer is yes to This Dot. But then I started thinking, well, what do I want to do? Like, what kind of impact do I want to make in my current job? And how do I want to grow in the next 5 to 10 years? So I kind of looked at the ecosystem. At the time we were working with people like Moderna, Novartis, Roche, Oura Ring, those types of folks. And I think that's been some of the most impactful work that we've been able to do. I think the reason is because, generally developers, you like helping people, but like when you can make impacts, right? Like I've been able to see myself make pretty big impacts on the web by just sticking people in a room and having conversations. So how do I bring that to the Atlanta ecosystem and do things in the kind of like the health and life sciences space so that we can all work better together?
What made you focus on the health and that's how we met?
Yeah.
Was through that, because that's been my passion throughout my entire life, is that.
Yeah.
However, your brand for this dot really is across all industries, right? It's not focused in that. So what really, and I know that you're super focused right now on and I'm grateful because it's very helpful to me and my teams.
Yeah.
But what is it that really was a calling for you that you navigated in that direction?
I think I just, you just pick and choose sometimes and see what happens. And so I kind of picked and chose and saw what happened. We do a lot in the financial services sector as well, right? But like, again, in health and life sciences, being able to, impact lives in that sense. And I feel like not only do we, as we get older, start looking for, okay, what's the impact I'm going to have on this world?
Our legacy.
Will. Exactly. But also, I think the younger generation that's coming, they don't want to just code, right? Like they want to do something that is meaningful.
Yeah. They are what is the phrase? Very purpose-driven generation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think generally like the world is becoming more purpose-driven, if you will. So being in the health and life sciences space, I think really helps that because, it keeps my developers on my team excited and engaged generally. And again, I mean, you're able to make pretty big impacts with what you do with development.
I used to say when we were building Florence Healthcare at the same time. I started in December of 2015. And Florence Healthcare is a document management company in the life sciences space. Mm-hmm. And what I used to say to people is that document management is not sexy. Advancing cures is sexy.
Yes.
And I think then when they could make that connection, yes, we're building code to do this document management for these clinical trials that are advancing cures and helping to save lives, then they could use those skills towards a greater good.
Yes. And I mean, again, I think it's so funny because, baby boomers complained about millennials, I think it was, right? And then millennials are complaining about...
We all complain about the next generation without realizing that they're living in the space that they have and thriving in that, right?
Yeah. But I mean, it's an exciting space to be. I mean, we still continue to do work outside of the health and life sciences space, but I think, there's so many amazing women in this space too. I don't know what it is. And I also feel like Atlanta's thriving in that ecosystem.
Totally.
I think with AI as well, you're definitely seeing a lot of movement in the health and life sciences space. I'm sure other industries as well, but I don't know. There just seems to be like, I don't know. I like it. So.
I love it. So I'm grateful for that. Actually, I want to tie to the woman part because we were earlier this week at an event for International Women's Day that you helped set up and run. And I was just thinking about something you mentioned a moment ago when you were talking about the coding, right? And your boyfriend would just go and write a script and you're like, great. Like he did that. I can probably do that. And I love the moment when you said you started doing things and then you got asked to speak at a conference when you were 3 weeks in.
Yeah.
And I'll just play a stereotype. A lot of women would say, no, I'm not qualified. I can't do this. And historically, a lot of men would jump in and say, absolutely. And I feel like your personality, you've really crossed both of those barriers and connected and really helped to empower women to jump in new ways.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, one, where did you find your voice? Like, were you born and you were born to like, I can do these things. I am woman, hear me roar. Or was there a pivotal moment in your life?
I don't think so. Honestly, I still remember my first company, right? So when I was 18, I went to this jewelry show And my friend from high school was actually there, and his parents were actually in the jewelry business. So I was like, oh, I'm going to buy all these, and it was amethyst and, jade and pearls and things like that. But I was buying these like strands of beads to play with. And then he basically gave them to me for free, right? Because it's all his, uncles in this space. So they're like, yeah, whatever, take whatever you want.
Right.
And then that weekend, I remember just sitting there and making a ton of jewelry on my boyfriend's bed. So we had a queen size bed. And by the end of the weekend, I had all these earrings that I made. And so I said, well, I guess I'll sell them. And then I just started a jewelry business. So I don't know what it is about what my personality, but I think it's just, I've just kind of always been like that. So,
and I think, so I can appreciate that because I think the same for me when people say, how did you learn to be resilient or how did you, and, my story, I was raised in a very abusive childhood, but I'm grateful that I was just like, no, I can do this. Like, I have 3 brothers. Like, I see them put their pants on. Like, they are just like me, right?
Yeah.
Like, if they can do this, I can do this. And I love that. And actually, the thing that I love is the voice that you have in the community to help empower other women leaders to reach out to that. So I think that is amazing. I want to talk a little bit about hiring. So, you've built and scaled many teams and not just at this Dot Labs, at all of your companies, right? So a common question I'm getting right now from people are, how do you hire? What techniques do you hire? What's your secret sauce to hiring, right? And I'm often thinking, I don't really know how to answer this question. So because you've done it in different fields multiple times, what would you say that your strategy for hiring is?
I think when I look at hiring these days, I always look for culture adds, not culture fits.
Yeah, tell me more. That was another question I had. That was actually the very next question. You're looking at my note cards. It's not fair. Yes.
I think like there's this idea of groupthink, right? And there's this idea of, okay, if everybody's the same, it's obviously not good, right? Diversity matters. But then there's also this idea of you want to hire people who are better than you.
Yep.
And that's so important because you want to be able to learn from more people around you. And you can't do that, especially at the top. Like you need to do that by hiring better people than you.
Yep.
So we definitely try to do that at this Dot. I think one of the things that I made a big mistake on, so my last company, Dish Crawl, we were hiring 20 people a week. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was really crazy. We were scaling like crazy,
How many employees did you have? So how long was the company? How many employees did you have when you sold the company? What was that? What did that look like?
It was like, I think at 100 and something when I sold it, but we had scaled up to 250. It was a very we basically, we had this model where we had ambassadors that we hired full time all around the US and Canada.
Okay.
And so there were these like little mini Tracys in each little city.
I love the idea of this.
Well, that's what my operations person, talk about, you're a great operations person, but Amy was my operations person. When she came in, she was just like, how do I scale Tracy?
Yeah.
I
love this.
And then so she like figured out how to operationalize me, my brain. And then we just scale, once we figured it out, we scaled. I mean, we went from 15 cities to 125 cities.
Wow.
Every single in like 4 months. Wow. And that's like people on the ground, 125 people on the ground.
Wow.
In just a few months. So it grew like crazy.
Okay.
Once we finally figured out how the heck to do it. But I think what ended up happening was, it's so funny because I left corporate because I was so sick of, there were these like older women at the time who, 8 o'clock is when we're supposed to be at our desk. And I swear
in the morning?
Yes. And I swear
I'm getting
to
out of
God,
bed at 8 in the morning.
Yeah. But these women, they were just like, you could see them scowl because I was 5 minutes late.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, do you have anything better to do with your life? And so I just really hated that environment. And so I very shortly left thereafter. But because hiring 20 people a week, it was crazy. And so because I let kind of like that get away from me and I wasn't doing the initial hiring and things like that, or doing a vibe check, if you will, I ended up with this like mean girl situation in my office.
Oh, wow.
And so, you kind of like wake up one day and you're like, wait a second, like I literally am in the situation in which I didn't like that I left corporate for.
Right. Yeah.
So that sucked.
Yes. Yeah. Because I know you're a big culture person.
Yeah.
And I know things I know about you is you're a huge culture person. You really care about human beings.
Yeah.
You want to make a big impact in the world. And to think, wait, I wouldn't work in this environment. How have I somehow created an environment I wouldn't even work in?
Yeah. This whole like, you can't sit with us. Haha, it's so cute. Like, no, it's not cute.
No.
Yeah. So that really annoyed me. So with this dot, and it took a long time to get that out.
Yes.
I mean, a long time.
That's a lot of drops of vinegar spoiling milk.
Oh my. I remember, unfortunately, finally letting go of somebody who just like, and then her best friend, we were afraid to let her go because her best friend worked there.
Okay.
And so when we finally let her go, her best friend was like, thank God.
Wow.
Now I can enjoy my work. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so awful. Because the reason why we didn't let her go is because we didn't want to let her friend, we didn't want her to lose her friend who was a very high performer.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just, but again, you're like mid to late 20s trying to run a company that's scaling so crazy. It's
these are mistakes that people who are late in their career make, to be super clear.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
yes,
yeah.
I mean, I've been in situations where you're like, okay, and I talk a lot on this podcast with guests about that single drop of vinegar spoiling milk and brilliant jerks. Brilliant jerks are those people that are really good at numbers, but they are jerks to everyone else in the company or even to the customers. They don't like all of these different factors, right?
Yeah.
So many companies and so many individuals, for one reason or the other, are afraid to get rid of this person.
Yes.
And yet the studies, the research shows that if you get rid of this brilliant jerk, everyone else rises to the occasion.
Yes. Well, actually, that brings up a really good point, because I think a lot of time women, we're like, okay, we can't take a vacation. We're holding everything together. Like, what's going to happen? Like, nobody else will do this and that and whatever, right? But, sometimes you look at, I mean, it's not just guys, okay? But like, let's just take men, like a guy, for example, right? Like my husband, like, would the world come to an end if I wasn't there and everything wasn't running? No, I guess it would kind of just get figured out, right? But it feels like, no, like you are not doing it right. I'm talking about like managing all the babies.
Right.
But I think that's the same thing, right? Like if you let go of that, like space will fill in and it'll be okay anyways.
Right. Yeah, we are super paranoid that if we lose this one factor, the world will come to an end.
Yeah.
And yet we find out that when we get rid of this factor, that's a really negative factor, we're just keeping it for fear, right? It's like the duct tape holding things together.
Yeah.
That then when we get rid of it, that we actually allow the healthy bonds to form and the people that maybe need to grow into that responsibility. Or the reality that, man, if it's not done my way, is it really the end of the world? Probably not.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So then let's dig a little bit more then into culture fit versus culture add. I've never heard that philosophy before. I love it. So tell us a little bit more. How do you define the difference between the two?
I think culture fit, you're looking for somebody who's going to fit into your culture versus somebody who is going to change your culture or add to your culture. And what I mean by that is, hey, your team might be really good at X, Y, and Z, right? But like, you really need expertise in, let's say, product or something, right?
Okay.
I think a lot of times, for some reason, like a lot of people hire to think like, can I manage this person? And when they feel like they can't.
We should pause on a moment, right? That is so true. And oftentimes I think that when I recently had a conversation with someone that was talking about something very similar to this. Yeah. And I think that if you're listening to this and you're having those thoughts, maybe pause for a moment and think about the fact about how you're holding yourself and your team and your organization back.
Yes.
Because that's absolutely not what's going to help you hire the most amazing people.
Yes. Yeah, it's not about finding people you can manage, because then you're never going to grow beyond yourself.
Exactly.
Right. So you're looking for that culture fit, or like somebody that fits within an organization versus, wow, this person is so amazing. Whoa, I could really learn from this person. Like, don't think about managing, but more think about partnering or teaming up with somebody and figuring out how they're going to teach you. I think that that's really important. I, as our team has grown, like I just refuse to, and maybe this is because I was burned in the past from my last startup, right? But I just have to do the vibe check. Like I have to do the.
Okay, what's your vibe check?
My vibe check is just like literally you can tell, right? Like within 5 minutes, you can kind of tell if somebody's a jerk or not.
Yeah. I think there are a few key things how they interact. I love, and I can't remember whose book it was in that I recently read, but I love the teams that will like check if it's a larger company, right? Mm-hmm. Check with the receptionist and say, how was this person?
Oh,
yeah. How was this? How do they treat you and interact, right? And I love when I get to know someone who like ask them at your previous company, did you know your janitor's name, or did you know, like, I really want to know, does this person care about humans as humans, or are they just like a means to the end for them?
Yes. That is so important. But I have good instincts. Do you know what I'm saying? So I within 30 seconds or so, I mean, you can really tell. I remember going on maternity leave and I let the guys take over.
Was this for the twins?
This was
or your first?
This was for my first.
Okay.
So for my first, when I went on maternity leave, and they're like, "Okay, we're about to hire this person," and I had just come back and I met with this person. I was like, "Oh my God, no!" Like I could literally tell in just that second that this is kind of like, I don't know, kind of a dick.
But not everyone has that vibe feeling. We all make hires and then we look back and we're like, what was I thinking on that day, right? So I think even you probably say there are some hires that you've made like that. Yeah. So what do you like so aside from it being a vibe, if you're trying to coach someone on hiring, are there any key things that stand out to you?
Gosh, I'm trying to think. Usually I'm just always doing the vibe check, to be honest. But when I try to coach my people, it's more about checking to see what their motivations are.
Yes.
So why are you here? Are you going to be around for a while? What's going on in your life? Because I think as I've gotten older, I think one of the things you realize is you're just kind of along for everyone else's journey in life, and you guys are just kind of having your own journeys.
Yeah.
And so what kind of journey is whomever you're going to be hiring on, and does that fit within what the company needs at that moment, right?
Do you have a favorite interview question that you always ask, or no? I think your first book needs to be Tracy's vibe check.
No, but I think I reflect back on something when I'm talking to people, I reflect back on something that one of my first investors said. And he was really trying to understand me and figure out what made me tick. And once he figured out what motivated me, then he felt like he could better understand me.
That's so wise. Yes.
And that's kind of what he did for everybody around him, right? Like he's always trying to figure out, okay, like what motivates you? Is it fame? Is it money? Is it family? Because I think when you do that, then you can have much more reasonable conversations, or kind of like get down to the nitty gritty when it comes to people. So I think that that's kind of what I tend to do, and getting to know people. Like
humans as humans.
Yeah.
In the episode right before this, when I interviewed Steve Garrity, we talked exactly about that. And he had just earlier that day or the day before had just done a quarterly business review with his team. And his thing was, okay, I want everyone to go around and say, where do you want to be a year from now? Or what are your goals a year from now? I'm not going to say perfectly. Listeners, you can listen to the episode and see what he said. But he said it was such an amazing team building time as well, because then he really could see what motivated everyone and how they could all help each of those teams kind of get to where they needed to go or they wanted to go. And he talks a lot about trying to find out for each person. He talked about one employee that she was the breadwinner of her home. And so she was motivated by spending time with her family, and she needed to make good money so that then she could spend time with her family. So in thinking about things to do that would allow her to balance that really helped her. And also when employees feel that way, they want to stay with you longer, right?
Yeah, we're super lucky. I mean, so many people at this site have been with us for years and years and years. So it's kind of crazy to think. I mean, I'm like, oh my God, I've worked with you for how long? 6 years, 5 years?
Well, in this
years,
day and age,
years?
that's a huge long time when no one gets gold watches anymore. Do you even know? Are you old enough to know what a gold watch?
I don't know what a gold watch is. But...
Oh my gosh, I love this. I love this. Okay, to be clear, I was lecturing earlier today at Georgia Tech for their PhD program for biomedical engineering on project management. And I was like, okay, I'm going to use 3 case studies of classic cases of failure of project management. And it was hysterical because right before the person who I had lecture with me, she's like, I bet none of the people are old enough to remember any of those, like New Coke versus Coke. And of course, they looked at me like, what are you talking about? So the gold watch thing, though, Simon Sinek talks a lot about this on his podcast. You know, back in the day, people stayed at their companies for 30, 40, 50 years. And then as their retirement, they would get a gold watch. That was the standard thing, right? Yeah. And so the conversation now is that there's really not loyalty on either side of it. Like no company keeps you that long, right? Most companies aren't in business that long. And additionally, employees don't stay that long. So my thought is that I know someone's never going to stay for a gold watch in those old mindset.
Yes.
But I want while they're there in that period of time to grow and learn through that. So now you know about the gold watch. So
Love that.
Okay. So, and here, my next question was, we're talking about keeping employees, is what is your strategy for maintaining a high-performing team while also fostering creativity and innovation?
Yeah, there's, I think going back to this idea of keeping people, right? We have, I feel like Vista's a very family-friendly place,
Tell me more.
Well, at one point in time, everybody had 3-year-olds. And so, what is it, 2025, that's been around since for 8-ish or so years, right? So we spent a good portion of our time kind of like through the COVID times. And so you're in the Slack channel and people are posting pictures of it's like, guess what this is on my window, and it's like, oh my gosh, is that poop? Things like that, right? And it's funny because some of the folks joke. They're like, yeah, I'm here because hopefully all the baby stuff will rub off on me.
They're back to the water cooler days when people used to say, have you been drinking from the water cooler? Because everyone in this department got pregnant at the same time.
Funny.
Yes, that's what they used to say at those times.
Yeah.
I love this generational gap that you and I have. But yeah, they would say, stay away from the water cooler because Sarah and Jenna and Mary in this department all got pregnant at the same time. So it must be in the water at that water cooler.
Funny. Well, we actually have, we call it water cooler on Thursdays. So we have a little water cooler, which is like a 15-minute kind of get together with the team.
Just a check-in about casual things and how are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
And did your baby that you're potty training poop in the toilet? Kind of.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a very and so one thing that we kind of do is, parents have pickups, this and that, or they need to do something and then come back later. And so we're pretty, we're pretty, I don't know, family friendly in that sense, as long as everyone's getting their job done. And I think that maybe that's why people stay too, right? From a culture perspective, we care about our people, it matters, right? We care about people's growth, what they want. I don't know.
You're not a micromanager.
It depends on who you ask.
I love this. Okay, tell me more.
No, I mean, it's just, I think it's really important to know your strengths and your weaknesses.
Yep.
And so, some people do really well with my management style and some people don't do really well with my management style. And I think working in a team is about, especially working with other leaders, right, in the leadership team, it's about understanding what everybody's management styles are.
Oh, so true.
And then like which management style works best with, operations or marketing or this or that, and how to get them what they need to be successful. So yeah, some people work amazing with me and some people don't. And that's okay, because then, we figure it out and don't let me mess things up.
Well, I love that, because it's also one of the things I like to think about is having team members work with each other and say, like, there's this idea that you can write your own instruction manual for working with me. Okay, so for example, I hate talking on the phone. So send me a text or a Slack message and I am so on it. But if you're calling me constantly on the phone, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't have the time to answer this, right? Versus other people, if you're texting or Slacking or sending them an email, they're never going to respond. You have to call to them.
Right.
Or, I, for example, I'm not a morning person. So don't schedule a meeting before 9 or 9:30 in the morning for me. Yeah. And I will be really on top of it at the meeting at 9:30. Yeah. If you schedule it at 8, A, I won't be there.
Yeah.
And B, if I was there, I'm just not going to be highly functioning.
Right.
So understanding those things about team members is really important.
Yeah.
I think, one of the things I want to do, because it's been really interesting lately to hear people's perspective on managers versus leaders. And I want to do a montage on this. So tell me, when you think about the difference between a manager and a leader, what do you think some of the key distinguishing factors are?
I think a manager is more trying to get through, day-to-day tasks, right? Or you're driving towards, whatever goal has been set forward. But a leader is really trying to inspire a vision and allow people to figure out how to do it themselves, if you will, right? A leader might say, hey, this is the vision for what I need to do. And then a manager, is typically trying to implement that vision, right? By kind of managing on a day-to-day to like, okay, here's the action items we need to do to kind of meet this vision or work towards this vision.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about being a CEO and a technologist. How do you balance technical excellence with meeting your business goals?
That is very hard. I mean, I think when starting this dot, so when I was starting this dot, I was able to just hang out and code 24/7. It was amazing. And, 2 years in, I said, okay, I can only do it half the time. 3 years in, it's like less and less and less and less and less. I think one of the things I spend a lot of time doing is speaking at conferences and giving technical talks. And so last year I talked a lot about AI, talked about RAG.
I don't know what the latter one is.
RAG?
Yeah, what is that?
It's retrieval. Oh my God. Retrieval augmented generation.
Okay.
Right. And so RAG is basically what everybody does. So when you have a chatbot, for example.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't want this chatbot to just be ChatGPT.
Right.
It needs to know, let's say we're creating an Angela chatbot. It needs to know like all of your whatever,
Okay.
So, what people will do is they'll basically upload all of your podcasts into a vector database. And then before ChatGPT responds, like, who is Angela? Or, hi, I'm Angela and whatever, they'll pull actually from the vector database all of the information from that podcast.
Okay.
So that's the retrieval part, right? Like they're pulling before they're actually responding. The augmented part is instead of ChatGPT saying, hi, I'm ChatGPT, they're like, hi, I'm Angela, and so you actually tell ChatGPT what it is. You are Angela and you are blah, 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 whatever, right?
So it's very personalized.
Right. And then the generation part is just the ChatGPT part of it, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of how, all these chatbots that we're seeing these days, that it's just basic RAG. It's like you give it more information to understand the context, you tell it what it actually is, right? And then you're basically building any chatbot that you see out there these days.
Yeah, that is amazing. Okay, so you had to transition from, and I think this is actually a pivot a lot of leaders struggle with. A lot of entrepreneur leaders struggle with is the pivot from being the person building to the person kind of running, growing, and leading the company and the vision. So can you talk a little bit about, like, was there a pivotal moment where you suddenly realized, wow, I am only coding never at all anymore? Or what? I don't know.
I mean, I think it just comes naturally, right? Like, you only have so many hours in the day and there's only so much you can do. So from a coding perspective, that's kind of what led me to not code so much anymore, right? Every year it's like, okay, I'm doing it less and less and less.
Right.
I think one of the pivotal points for me when it came to managing the development team was that I remember I was managing a project. It was a very high profile project. I was talking to one of the smartest engineers we had. He was so great, this guy, okay? And it was right before Christmas break, and I don't remember the conversation I had, but it was really difficult. Like, we were not doing as well as I wanted on this specific project.
Okay.
And I was leaning on him as the lead to kind of give me the information to try to figure out how to make this better.
Right.
But, like, I somehow said something, and so he quit after Christmas break.
Oh, no.
And what he said to whoever he downloaded with was, like, he couldn't sleep all Christmas break because I said that I only trusted him 80%.
Oh.
And, like, I don't remember the exact words, okay, that I said, but I think it's awful that somebody, like, basically didn't enjoy their Christmas break because they thought I only trusted them 80%, which is not what I had intended.
Right.
But it was at that point in time where my team was like, you cannot talk to the engineers anymore. They're scared of you. Like, the business has grown to a size to where if I'm managing them directly, it's terrifying, right? Because it's coming from the CEO.
Right.
So that was a pretty big pivotal point for me. So I don't manage the engineers anymore.
Yeah. And I think it also ties to us realizing that, or having a sounding board of other people to say, this is how you're presenting yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not the way that you intend to. I had a similar experience when I was at Florence, and I was managing like 2/3 of the company. And as a COO, you're constantly going from like marketing to sales to then project management to then going into product and then sprint reviews. It's your context switching constantly.
Yes.
And I found that what I would do, because my meetings were like back to back, is then I would just walk into a meeting in problem solving mode.
Yeah.
And I would just end up being this bitch that was like, okay, here's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And through leadership coaching, which is one of the reasons I'm really big about hiring coaches for companies to come in, have the external view, this really came out. And so it allowed me then to say to people, okay, if you see me, first off, stop booking me back to back. Like, I need like 5-minute context switching piece time. You can do box breathing or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And secondly, if you see me coming in and going into this mode, then it's not me being my best self.
How was your day? Like, make you stop.
So how are you doing, Angela? I cannot remember. We had a code word. I cannot remember what it was because this was several years ago. But yeah, and when some people use the code word, and then as a leader, I would thank them publicly. Like, thank you so much for saying that right now, because now I realize that I am going into bitch mode, and that's not helping any of us.
Yeah.
And so I think that was really awesome.
Yeah.
I can see with our personalities how can be.
Because let me tell you, I've recently had some feedback, actually with my nannies. Because I'm just running from meeting to meeting. And I'm like, oh, by the way, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Can you do that? And then one of them finally wrote me this really long text message. And I was like, and I sat down and I was like, I'm so sorry. It's not because whatever. Like, I know I need to write it down. Like, I love you with my babies. But, she was giving me the same feedback, right? Because I was just running around.
Yeah.
Like, so I think it's the same thing, right? Like, stopping and making sure you're, like, building rapport and...
Yeah, exactly. Okay, scaling and innovation. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you think companies face when scaling their engineering teams?
Oh my goodness. I think it's really important to have teams that you can trust. And
more than 80% can resist.
true. So true. But no, the idea of so engineers love to tinker, right? There's a new technology. Oh, we should rebuild this thing. We should do this. We should do that.
The kings and queens of scope creep.
Right. But the other thing is, they genuinely believe that. And a lot of times, right, like when you're passionate about something, you genuinely believe you should do this. But I think it's the engineers and leaders that can take a step back and say, okay, is this contributing to the strategy or the vision that the CEO has put out, or the vision of, whatever we've been set out to do this quarter or this year is really important. I think another thing that's really important is having engineers that ask questions.
Love this. Tell me more. So how do you encourage them to ask questions?
I think it's a type of personality, to be honest. So, you have engineers who are like, they really care about quality code. They really care about this. They're really like, oh, this isn't good enough because of this, but like, I'll do it anyways. And, different types of engineers work better in different types of scenarios, right? But I feel like with the economy, like the tech economy kind of, changing in the past few years or so, what I found is that people who are more product focused, who will ask questions, who kind of care less about how it gets done, but more that it gets done and it achieves a business goal.
Yeah.
Those are the types of engineering teams that will be more successful in the future and be more successful right now. So that's kind of what we found. It's, I think it's a difficult lesson to learn for some engineers who are just like really passionate about the craft. I always like to give this one example. So designers, right?
Okay. Yes.
I'm working with a designer right now. He's a new guy I've been working with, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, this feedback sucks, because I'm like, well, just make it more interesting, But I've worked with my design team for quite some time, the SOTS design team, and the thing I love about them is I will tell them what I want, and then they'll come back to me with what I actually wanted. And I think
that
very
is
important.
really hard to do, because the thing is that oftentimes customers lie to you, meaning they think they know, or they may phrase it one way, but really good designers and engineers are able to break it down into what success really looks like and delivering that.
Yes. And that's like magical, because you never know, having been the client, you never actually know what you really want.
Exactly.
Like you think you know what you want, but it takes that person, that engineer or that designer, to get into your head and gather the requirements and present to you what you actually wanted, right? Solve the problem you're actually trying to solve.
Yep.
Those are the ones that are the most successful. And that's kind of what I love about our team, because everybody on our team, whether they're junior, mid, senior, whatever, kind of think that way. So that's the biggest thing I think that teams and leaders need to make sure that their engineering teams are doing.
Well, I love that focus on asking questions, right? Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, if you're not asking questions, you might be on a team and you say, oh, well, the customer said we need to build this super sexy widget that does these things.
Yes.
And someone who's going to ask questions is going to then go back and say, okay, what are you wanting to accomplish with this?
Yes.
Or tell us who all of your end users are and what are they doing in their day? Yeah. And thinking through, or also, when you're building something, someone who doesn't ask questions may see something that's a little off, but they're like, oh, I was told to build this, so I'm just going to continue to the end, endure to the end on this. And then the ones that are going to ask questions may pause and say, oh, wait, now that we're at this stage, are we going in the right direction?
Yes. And it's so important because most projects are not 1, 2 months, 1 week, 2 weeks, but they go on for a year, 2 years, right? And so as requirements change, as the economy changes, as business needs change, you constantly have to be stopping and asking yourself, is this project that had a 3-year timeline something that we're still aiming to do? Like, what's changed about the business that maybe we need to change what we initially set out to do? And that's why you see a lot of projects fail, right? Like you go into a hole for 3 years and then you end up with like something that doesn't even matter anymore.
We were just lecturing so much on this today in this class because, you have these PhD students and And several of the focuses that we had were on monitoring and progress updates in the moment to look and say, okay, wait, if we were supposed to do this by this time period and we haven't, and we have these dependencies lined up on it, well, then everything's going to shift, right? Or, okay, here's where we're at right now. Does the market still align with this?
Yes.
Having those critical questions in those time points. And if you're not making those progress status updates, you're not continually monitoring, you're not pausing a little bit, at least having a little bit of agile methodology. And we talked a little bit about waterfall versus agile. Then you could get to the end of a 3-year deal and that everything you just built is now not even relevant anymore.
Yeah. Which is very sad, to be honest. And
that happens.
Yeah. And I think we talk a lot about, this idea of leadership changing and needs changing. And, especially people who are product managers or engineering manager, director, VP, a lot of times, if you're like not in the C-suite and kind of, one, like, what is it? Southwest is just changing around their board right now, right? Okay. So there's like a lot of a lot of these changes that you're seeing is coming from the board. And so if you're not part of that, you can kind of feel like thrown around.
Right.
When you're within a large organization. And I think, it's really hard to keep people motivated when you're like, okay, does my work even matter anymore? So,
or is it going to matter in 6 months?
Exactly. And so having those checkpoints, having those conversations and really pushing, my CTO is so funny because we were talking to this one like non-technical company, right? And he just kept pushing them because he's like, they wanted to basically move everything away from PHP because they were sold that like PHP is the worst.
Okay, and tell the audience what PHP is.
PHP is just a back-end language, right?
Okay.
And so, it's considered, I don't know, I guess it's considered outdated, which is, I don't know, kind of silly. But the other thing is, if it's not broken, like, don't fix it. And so it's not like it was broken, but the leadership was convinced that, was convinced by another person that came in that, like, everything's broken, we have to rewrite it all.
Right.
And we kept pushing them, like, do you really want to spend, and they were also sold that this was going to take like less than 6 months. And we're like, this is like a 3-year project. Do you really want to do this? Like, what business value is it contributing? Like, you can't add new features. What, like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, because you can't do anything during that period of time because you have to completely redo the back end.
Well, you can if you do it the right way, but like in the way that they were proposing it, it was, you wouldn't just, you're exactly right. Like, you wouldn't be able to do so. So we almost kind of like got ourselves, one of my VPs told him, was like, dude, sometimes you just need to shut up and like do it, because we were about to lose this deal because we didn't want them to hurt themselves, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
And it was so funny because we went through the process and then, about a year later, they're like, well, you didn't tell us. And we're like, we literally almost like didn't win this contract because we were telling you not to do this.
Right.
So sometimes it's hard to save people from themselves, but
yeah. But I think that continuing to do that and to create a culture to do that, because if you're creating a culture where everyone really wants what's best for the customer, then you can, once again, the customers are not always right in this instance. So
a culture of curiosity as well, I think is really important.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So with AI and automation reshaping the tech landscape, how do you see leadership in tech evolving?
I think that everybody just needs to embrace it. I always say 2024 was the year of the POC, but I think we're getting very much past now the first movers.
Yeah.
Right. And the
POC
early adopters.
being proof of concept.
Proof of concept. Yep. Yes. You're getting past the early adopter phase.
Yep.
Right. Like, people are using AI in their everyday lives. It is crazy to see what you can do with tools like Cursor, for example. I think the way you communicate with teams and across teams is changing as well. Like, for example, v0.dev, you can go to the website v0.dev. You can just type in and say, hey, build me this build me this chatbot or build me this whatever, and you can actually tell it like, make it blue, make it rainbow, have some unicorns on it, whatever you want. That's what I like to build in my free time. But what it allows you to do, though, is allows you to visualize. Because remember, we talk about like a lot of business folks who are not technical don't really know how to verbalize what they actually want.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So the fact that you can just like quickly build something and show your design team or show your dev team exactly what you're trying to build, and you're communicating in a way, I think it changes how people communicate with each other and makes it much easier for people to communicate. And much easier for people to like not get blocked by one org doing this or one org doing that. So I think things will be sped up much faster. And I think that unfortunately, engineers who are not just using AI to do the annoying things, the tedious things that you don't want to do, or don't enjoy doing, are going to unfortunately just take so much longer. And that kind of sucks too.
Yeah. I remember when Georgia Tech was really doing a big push of this is why we're embracing AI. Several of the board members on the College of Engineering, I remember one in particular where he said, I don't want to hire someone who's not willing to use AI.
Yes.
It's going to take them 3 times longer to do something that someone else. And I mean, another thing that I really like about AI as well is that was to put in something and have it give you an output and then say, okay, say it in a different way.
Yes.
And I think that's powerful because none of us speak the same language and we don't receive things the same way. And if you can put something in and have it give you an output in multiple different, let's say, cultural phrasings or multiple different ways, then when you're working with a client, you can test out different ones so that you can see what resonates with them.
And you can teach yourself too.
Exactly.
Right? Like for example, my Airbnb, I have a few Airbnbs, and the feedback in the reviews is like, wow, she's so strict. And I'm like, okay, look, I wouldn't be so strict if somebody didn't smoke pot all over my house and I had to say, don't smoke pot all over my house, or hey, maybe don't play beer pong and get my floors all sticky. So I have these rules, right? From bad actors.
Right.
And so I put it in ChatGPT and I was like, make me sound less whatever. But I think like for some people, right? Like if you're getting the feedback of like, hey, you sound like a jerk. You can, before you write an email, ask ChatGPT like, okay, write the email and then just be like, make me sound less like a jerk. And then what'll end up happening is you'll kind of like through ChatGPT learn what you were saying. Or you can actually even say like, why do I sound like a jerk in this email? And ChatGPT will tell you.
Which I think is amazing. I mean, I've used Grammarly in emails for years and written it and then said, okay, and you can say, make it more assertive or make it shorter and there's so much that you learn over time just by doing that. So I love that. Okay, what is your vision for the future of software consulting and business leadership in the tech industry?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard question.
I know it is.
The future is really, I think, just, oh my God, I feel like the future is just AI right now. I feel like everyone is just very, very, very focused on AI. I think there's going to be a lot of shifts in the next 5 to 10 years on just like how everything is done. So that's kind of been my big focus and kind of what I feel like everybody is focused on. I think it's taken us a few years to kind of get on the train, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think that changes, again, I told you, it changes how people communicate.
Yes.
It changes timelines. It changes how things are built. I think people who are scared of AI, it's just a tool. It's just another tool in your tool belt. It's nothing crazy.
I mean, remember when they were afraid of calculators and because we were never going to be able to do math, which I guess is true. I really can't do math.
It's very true. Or typing and you can't write so well anymore.
Exactly. There are so many instances of that. And, I had Eric on the show and we talked about AI and we talked about it specifically in healthcare because I really wanted in a healthcare perspective to help teams and organizations think about how they're structuring their data in certain ways so that when you're thinking about the use of AI, how it could impact privacy and some of it. So we talked a lot about those types of things. So I think it's also collaborating with experts that can help you set your systems up to be successful and then just lean in.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of things like the way you architect an application that, is using AI or something like that. Like things are changing so fast. I mean, things change weekly when it comes to the AI world. And so you just need to make sure everything is kind of composable, right? So you can very easily, switch out a model or something like that, or switch out a database. Like things, again, I mean, it's crazy. I was giving talks last year again about RAG and just the ease of use of how to do it. And the demos I built for my talks in January, like every single month, like I had to stitch together like 3 or 4 different things for my demo. But by the end of the year, OpenAI basically had everything in there for me. So I didn't even have to, stitch together these other 3 different little APIs or whatever. Yep. And like, that's how fast things are moving, right? So we just have to be ready for that. And I think just embrace it and see what happens, I mean, I'm not talking about the regulatory X, Y, and Z that's happening these days and right now, but that's a conversation for
another episode. yeah. But no, the AI piece of that, and I think it's just the reminder that once again, it is a tool.
Yeah.
And so I think the best way to not be afraid of something is to lean in and learn more about it.
Yes.
And oftentimes fear just comes from not knowing, ignorance, and that kind of stuff. So be one of those people that digs in and watch some of your episodes and that kind of stuff. Okay, so if there's one leadership lesson that you could leave with our listeners, what would it be?
I would say listen more and try to be more introspective. I think as leaders, you also need to just make space for yourself, right? Like if you don't make space for yourself, just like you said, or like running from one meeting to another, you're not going to have the time to, be introspective and, learn lessons and kind of reflect back and show up as your best self.
Amazing. Okay. So tell all the listeners how they can find you and all the amazing things that you're doing.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Lady Elite. Or you can find me on LinkedIn at Tracy S. Lee. This dot is THISDOT.co. So that's this dot.co. And then, gosh, we have a leadership podcast as well, which you've been on. So on YouTube, it's called The Leadership Exchange. So you can check that out. And then we have a top 10 JavaScript podcast too called Modern Web. So, and then I don't know if you're in Atlanta and you're doing stuff and you're a woman in tech or in health and life sciences, I'd love to connect with you and connect you into just the 10 million things. I don't know how many like random spreadsheets I have. I'm like, add this person to this spreadsheet, to that spreadsheet, to that spreadsheet. Because, how else do you keep up with everything, right?
I know, it's all over the place. I love it. Tracy just at the beginning of the year was like, I'm sending you all the invites for all of the things throughout the year. And my email was just like, which is like, this is amazing. I am in the know. So, okay, now a requirement of the podcast is to share your favorite motivational quote. So what is your favorite motivational quote?
I forgot.
I love it.
What was it?
So listeners, I will tell you, this is the challenge when you have your friend coming on the podcast because we were chatting and taking photos beforehand. Normally, I remind guests. So what do you think a motivational quote is that you want to leave listeners with?
Okay, well, I used to work at a motivational quote store.
Really?
It's called, I think it still exists. It's called Successories.
Successories.
You know Successories?
Yes, I do.
Oh my God. I actually, one last story is like, I actually, there was this boy that I thought was cute. And so I was like, what is this
I love how so many of your stories are like, my boyfriend
this boy,
and my boy.
It's seriously, that's like, I don't know what it is, but yeah, there's this boy, he was cute, and he worked at this poster store. And I was like, what's this poster store in the mall? But, oh, you guys are hiring? I want to work with a cute boy. And so then I started working there and I started looking around. I'm like, whoa, there's inspiration everywhere. And I was working at Successories.
I love this. Oh my gosh. I have bought so many Successory signs.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if you noticed in my office, I have quotes like all throughout the house and stuff.
Yes.
So, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to take one from Successories.
There we go.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I think this is a canoe. It's a picture of a canoe with a sunset. Success is a journey, not a destination. So really enjoy the ride you're on. You know, this is your life. Like, don't just wake up one day, whatever goal you're trying to achieve, like, enjoy the days, enjoy the weeks, and, you know, be proud of what you're accomplishing.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for putting the badass in this leadership podcast. I am really grateful.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for joining me for today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast. To hear more interviews with industry experts and learn how to grow your career and leadership potential, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. This podcast is a production of the AGN Group. To learn more about the AGN Group, visit our website at theagnGroup.com. There, you can discover more about our services, which include hosting workshops, management consulting, brand strategy, keynote speaking, and more. Follow us on all social media channels shown on the screen and displayed in the show notes. And until next week, be brave and be badass.